The Silent Pearls of Lysara. On the nights when the pearl moon hung above Lysara, the sea shimmered like an unsheathed blade. That was when the rare silver mussels emerged from the dark reefs, opened their shells by a narrow crack, and let the moonlight fall upon pearls for which merchants cheated, families plunged themselves into debt, and men slit each other's throats in harbor alleys. I dived for them, and sometimes, along the way, I stole secrets. My name is Akio. I was 23 years old, a cat Demi with black ears, an equally dark tail, and a dislike for people who asked too many questions. My hands were rough from salt water, my lungs stronger than those of most divers, and in dim light I could make out currents, rock ledges, and movements hidden from human eyes. Underwater, my sense of balance helped me keep my bearings even between swirling currents. On land, however, I was less certain, especially when it came to trust. Officially, I worked for the Veydan Pearl House, the largest trading house in the archipelago. I recovered mussels, inspected reefs, and guided paying guests to safe diving grounds. Unofficially, Master Soulbound, the house's administrator, sent me into warehouses, captain's cabins, and locked workshops. I listened to conversations, copied letters, and found out who was planning to undercut Veydan's prices. I told myself spying was simply another form of diving. You entered someone else's depths, took something valuable, and disappeared before the pressure crushed you. That night I was supposed to steal a tide chart. It's in the workshop of a young cartographer, Soulbound had said. Tavren Sorell, 22 years old, stubborn, insignificant, and convinced he's discovered something that doesn't concern him. What exactly? Soulbound had folded his fingers over his desk. On each one, he wore a ring set with a different pearl. You don't need to know. That answer should have made me suspicious. Instead, I thought about the 500 crowns he had promised me. Enough to finally buy a diving boat of my own. No more borrowed decks, no more shares owed to Veydan, no more jobs that required me to squeeze through windows. Freedom had its price. I was willing to make others pay it. Tavren's workshop stood at the end of a narrow pier, raised on stilts above the water. Small wind wheels made of shell limestone turned along the walls. Glass tubes hung beneath the roof, filled with glowing algae that rose and sank to display the changing tides. I waited until every lamp had gone dark, leaped from the neighboring roof onto the pier, and slipped a thin blade into the window latch. The catch gave way. My feet touched the wooden floorboards without a sound. Between tables covered in charts, measuring instruments, and half-polished crystal lenses, I moved toward the back wall. Soulbound had described what I was looking for, a chart of the eastern reefs marked in red ink. I found it inside a locked drawer. Unfortunately, Tavren found me at the exact same moment. "You could at least light a lamp," a voice said behind me. "Then you wouldn't ruin your eyes while stealing." I spun around. A young man sat on a narrow staircase leading to a sleeping loft. He wore an oversized sand-colored tunic and held not a weapon, but a teacup in both hands. His light brown hair stuck up as though he had been sleeping in it. The expression on his face was not frightened, only tired and annoyed. "You pretended you were gone," I said. "No, I turned off the lamps." "That's almost the same thing." "Only to bad burglars." My tail twitched traitorously against my leg. Tavren pointed at the chart in my hand. "Put it back." "And if I don't?" "Then you'll discover that the floorboards beneath you aren't nailed down." I heard the quiet creak, too late. The plank under my left foot tipped. I jumped aside, landed on a table, and tore down a chain of glass weights in the process. Tavren set down his cup and pulled a rope. A net dropped from the ceiling. It missed me because I rolled flat across the table. 2 glasses shattered. A measuring compass flew against the wall. "You're insane," I hissed. "You broke into my workshop." I jumped through the window. With the chart. The following morning, Tavren was sitting on the deck of my diving boat. I stood on the pier, staring at him for so long that one of the sailors asked whether I had fallen asleep. "Get off my boat," I said. "It belongs to the Veydan Pearl House." "Today it belongs to me." "Then you should pay better attention to who you steal from." He held up a small metal capsule. My lockpicks were inside it. Instinctively, I reached for the pouch at my belt. Empty? "When did you take those?" "When you were rolling across my table." I liked him even less immediately. Tavren got to his feet. "The chart you stole is worthless." "Then you won't miss it." "It was deliberately drawn incorrectly." That silenced me. He stepped closer but remained outside my reach. I wanted to know who would steal it. Now I do. "You know nothing. You work for Veydan. That's enough for now." The sailors were watching us. I reached for Tavren's sleeve, but stopped before touching him. "Come," I said instead, pointing toward the empty equipment shed on the pier. Inside, he spread a second chart across a crate. The eastern reefs were covered in black lines. Some formed spirals, others ended in small crosses. "The currents have changed over the last 6 months," he explained. "Not naturally. Someone is sinking underwater anchor stones into the channels and forcing the water into new paths." "Why?" "To make the independent diving grounds unusable. 3 smaller pearl clans have already lost their harvests. 2 boats have shattered on reefs that used to be safe." I folded my arms. "And of course Veydan is responsible." "Veydan buys the indebted diving grounds afterward for a fraction of their value." "That proves nothing." "That's why I need someone who can dive down and inspect an anchor stone." I laughed quietly. "You catch me breaking into your workshop, and then you want to hire me? I want to know whether you're merely for sale or also curious." "For sale?" "Pity. Curious people are usually cheaper." In the end, I went out with him. Not because I believed him. I wanted to know why Sorven had been so desperate to steal a false chart. Besides, Tavren promised me 50 crowns for a single dive. We reached Thorn Reef shortly before noon. Tavren steered his narrow survey boat himself. It was called Unyielding, which suited him and still looked ridiculous painted across the weathered planks. "My father built it," he said when he noticed my stare. "Was he a cartographer too?" "Lighthouse keeper." His tone ended the conversation. I strapped on my breathing tube, checked the rope around my waist, and jumped into the water. The cold closed around me. Sounds became muffled, movements clearer. I followed the rock face downward, past violet fan sponges and mussels that snapped shut as I approached. At the bottom, I found the anchor stone. It was as large as a barrel and fitted with green bronze runes. Between the symbols was a seal, a stylized open shell, the emblem of the Veydan Pearl House. I pried the seal loose with my knife. When I surfaced, Tavren was waiting at the edge of the boat. "Well," I threw the seal at his feet. He did not pick it up triumphantly. He merely looked at me. "Don't say anything," I warned. "I was only going to ask whether you'd prefer your 50 crowns in silver or trade tokens." "Silver?" "Of course. We could have gone our separate ways after that. Instead, we met 2 days later in a tea house above the fish market. Tavren brought more charts. I brought a list of Veydan's supply ships that I had copied from Sorven's office. Neither of us mentioned why I had come back. We compared routes, cargo volumes, and the dates when the currents had changed. Tavren worked thoroughly, but not patiently. Whenever a number failed to fit his theory, he tapped it with his finger as though he could intimidate it. "You desperately want to be right," I remarked. "I want the charts to be accurate." "That's not the same thing." He looked up. "And you desperately want to pretend you don't care about anything." My ears flattened. "That isn't the same thing either," he added more quietly. I stood up and left. The next evening, I found a jar of pickled honey plums outside my door with a note. I don't know how to apologize to Cat Demi. Fish seemed insulting. I took the plums inside. Over the following weeks, our meetings became routine. I dived at the marked locations and recorded the positions of the anchor stones. Tavren calculated how removing them would affect the currents. Sometimes we argued over every second sentence. He thought I was too cautious. I thought he was the kind of man who would insult a storm if the wind knocked over his measuring instruments. But I also learned that he checked every chart twice, because one wrong line could cost a ship. He made coastal maps for poor fishermen for free and pretended they had been left over by accident. He could not cook, sang off-key while working, and regularly forgot to sleep. He learned that I had grown up in the Southern District. My mother had been a pearl diver. My father had lost her during a storm and afterward blamed first the sea, then me. I had run away at 16. Sorven had found me, trained me, and taught me that information was more reliable than people. "And your father?" I asked one evening. Tavren was silent for a long time. "He's in Mara's prison," he finally said. 4 years ago, the beacon of the Eastern Lighthouse went out. 2 merchant ships struck the reef. Veydan claimed my father had been drunk." "Was he?" "He never drank." "That's what relatives often say." Tavren's expression hardened. "You don't have to believe me." "I don't believe anyone without proof." "Then at least we're alike in that." "We found the proof inside a sunken supply ship. The cargo records claimed it had carried lamp oil, but inside its hold were crates full of rune anchors. I also discovered a waterproof tube containing letters. One bore Sorven's seal. Its contents were unmistakable. Tavren's father had noticed the unusual ship movements and threatened to inform the island council. Sorven had then arranged for the lighthouse beacon to be sabotaged, and the blame placed on him. When I gave Tavren the letter, he read it 3 times. Then he folded it so carefully that it almost hurt to watch. 4 years, he said. For 4 years, my father thought no one believed him. Now you can get him released. Only if we bring the letter to the island council. I sat down on the edge of the pier. Sorven controls half the council. Then we give copies to every Pearl clan. And when he claims they're forged? Tavren ran a hand through his hair. You always find a reason to do nothing. Because I like staying alive? No, because then you never have to decide whose side you're on. The sentence struck more precisely than any knife. I jumped to my feet. You don't know me. I know someone who wants freedom but still carries out every order his master gives him. My tail lashed against the crates behind me. Sorven got me off the streets. And because of that, you owe him your entire life? You understand nothing about debts. My father is in prison because of my investigation. I understand enough. We parted in anger. That same evening, Sorven summoned me to his office. One of the copies I had made lay on his desk. "You've become careless," he said. I said nothing. "The cartographer is using you. As soon as his father is free, he'll hand you over to the council as Veydan's spy." "Maybe." "You don't believe me?" "I don't believe anyone without proof." Sorven's smile disappeared. He offered me my own boat. Not just any boat, but the Moon Crescent, a fast pearl-diving vessel with an enchanted keel. All I had to do was steal Tavren's original charts and burn down his workshop before the festival of the first tide. For the first time, I saw clearly what freedom meant in Sorven's eyes. A longer leash. I accepted the job. The next morning, I told Tavren everything. He stood in the middle of his workshop and listened without interrupting me. "You agreed?" he asked afterward. "So he'll believe I'm still on his side." "And are you on mine?" I could have given him a clever answer. Instead, I told the truth. I don't know how to be on someone's side. Tavren's shoulders lowered a little. "You stay," he said, "even when running away would be easier." "That sounds impractical." "It probably is." I looked at the charts, the glass instruments, and the disorganized stacks of notes. There was hardly anything valuable in this workshop, and yet I had found more honesty here than in all of Veydan's treasure rooms. "Then I'll stay," I said. We made a plan. At the festival of the first tide, the Pearl clans, merchants, and council members gathered around the great tidal basin. Tavren intended to project his charts onto the surface of the water with a projection crystal. Meanwhile, I would break into Veydan's warehouse and retrieve Sorven's master ledger, which recorded every payment connected to the anchor stones. 2 nights before the festival, we worked until morning. When the final calculations were finished, we sat on the roof of the workshop. Beneath us, the ebb tide moved through the pilings, making shells crack in the mud. "When this is over," Tavren said, "what are you going to do?" "Buy a boat." "And then?" I had never needed an answer to that question. "Dive," I said. "Go wherever I want." "Alone?" "Maybe." Tavren nodded, but his disappointment was too obvious to miss. "You could come with me," I said. He looked at me. "On your boat?" "You need someone to check your charts. And you need someone to stop you from breaking into other people's windows." "You won't manage that." "Then I suppose I'll have to stay for a long time." A silence settled between us that did not feel empty. I could have made a joke. Instead, I placed my hand on the roof tiles, halfway between us. Tavren looked at it. "Is that an invitation?" "A very cautious one." He slid his fingers beside mine without touching them immediately. "Akio," he said, "I want to kiss you." My breath caught, but I did not move away. That was surprisingly polite. "You can say no." I turned toward him. "I know." He waited. Only when I nodded did he lean forward. The kiss was quiet and a little uncertain. No tidal wave, no burning destiny, no promise of eternity. Just his lips against mine and the realization that closeness did not always have to be a trap. When we pulled apart, his forehead almost touched mine. "You're trembling," he said. "From the wind?" "Of course." "Say one more thing, and I'll throw you off the roof." Then I'd have to save my charts first. On the day of the festival, Tavren's workshop burned. Sorven had apparently decided not to wait for me. We saw the smoke from the tidal basin. For a moment, Tavren wanted to run back, but this time I did not keep my distance or hesitate. I grabbed his hand. "The copies are safe," I said. "Your proof is here. My entire work. You can redraw it. You can't redraw your father." His fingers closed around mine. Then we moved forward together. While Tavren prepared the projection crystal, I slipped into Veydan's warehouse. Sorven was waiting for me in the archive. "You were always talented," he said, "but never grateful. I gave you 10 years. I gave you a life. No, you gave me work and hoped I would never notice the difference." Behind him, the master ledger rested on a lectern. 2 guards stood at the door. I could not defeat them. I did not need to. My ears caught the rush of water through the pipes beneath the floor. Tavren had explained that the festival tide was pumped through those channels into the tidal basin. I threw my diving knife at the valve wheel. The bolt snapped. Water burst into the room. The guards lost their footing. I leapt over a table, grabbed the ledger and climbed onto a shelf. Sorven reached for my leg, but caught only my boot. I let him have it. Barefoot and dripping wet, I reached the festival. Tavren's chart was already glowing across the surface of the tidal basin. Black lines showed the manipulated currents. Representatives of the Pearl clans shouted over one another. Council members demanded proof. I threw the ledger at their feet. Sorven appeared moments later, soaked and furious. He denied everything until Tavren read his letter aloud, and several divers recognized the recovered seals. After that, events moved quickly. Veydan's warehouses were sealed. The island council guards arrested Sorven. That same evening, the council sent a ship to Maras to bring Tavren's father home. The anchor stones were recovered over the following months. Some reefs began to heal. Others would need years. Tavren's workshop could not be saved. So we built a new one. It did not stand on the same pier, but at the bow of the Moon Crescent, which the council awarded me in exchange for my testimony and the return of the master ledger. Tavren set up a charting table there that scattered everything across the floor whenever the sea grew rough. He claimed it was my fault because I sailed too fast. I claimed he could simply secure his papers. We had that argument on almost every voyage. His father was released and became a lighthouse keeper again, this time on a small island in the west. Tavren visited him often. Sometimes I went with him, though I never stayed long enough to grow used to the quiet evenings. Not yet. Tavren never pushed me. He did not ask whether I loved him. I did not ask it either. Instead, we learned how to live alongside each other. He warned me before touching my ears. I brought him food when he lost track of time over his charts. He accepted that I sometimes needed to dive alone. I accepted that freedom did not mean cutting every bond. 1 year after the festival of the first tide, we anchored above an unknown reef. I dived down at sunset and found a single silver mussel between white corals. Inside it lay no ordinary pearl, but one that shimmered in changing colors. Once, I would have sold it. Instead, I brought it to Tavren. He held it up to the light. We could repair the keel with this, buy new sails, and still have enough left to live through an entire winter. Probably. You don't want to sell it? No. What do you want to do with it? I pulled a thin leather cord from my pocket and threaded it through the small hole I had already drilled into the pearl. Give it to you. Tavren looked at me for a long moment. Is this a marriage proposal among cat Demi? No. Pity. My tail bumped against his leg. It means I found something valuable and decided not to give it away again. His smile softened. That sounds pretty serious. Don't get used to it. He let me tie the cord around his neck. Then he kissed me while the current struck against the hull beneath us and the pearl moon slowly rose above the sea. I was still a diver. Sometimes I was even still a spy, though only for fishermen who wanted to know which merchant was manipulating their prices. I remained cautious, suspicious, and probably more difficult than Tavren deserved. But I no longer ran from every depth, because I had learned that the sea was not made only of the things it swallowed. Sometimes it carried you away as well, not alone but side by side with a stubborn cartographer who wanted to check every current and was still willing to sail with me toward places where his charts showed nothing but empty parchment.